Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Utahns Against Hunger issue forum focusing on direct outreach. This is going to be the last of this year's set of forums focusing on different issues. We're going to just dive into it, and I'm going to get started by introducing our panel here. I'm Neil Rickard. I'm the child nutrition advocate with Utahns Against Hunger. I'm going to pass it over to Whitney Stephens.
Right, I'm Whitney Stephens. I work with Promise Partnership Utah, which is umbrellaed under Utah's Promise, formerly United Way of Salt Lake. I'm a partnership director and I work on basic needs, social determinants of health, and prenatal defied work. And I mostly convene partnerships to move them to systemic change.
Great. And now Ben Chenot.
Yeah, I work for 211 Utah. So we're an information referral network, part of the national 211 network. So we basically just connect Utahns in need to different resources across the state. And yeah, they just call the number 211 or visit us on our website, send us a chat, communicate with us any of those ways, and we connect them to food pantries, housing resources, all sorts of stuff across the whole state.
DJ Bracken.
Yes, thanks, Neil. I just want to say thanks to everybody who's here and for setting this up, Neil. I am DJ Bracken. I'm the executive director at the Utah Lunch Debt Relief Foundation. Our primary goal is to end school lunch debt permanently, hopefully through a legislative solution that I know Neil and I have been working very hard on. At the same time, we also offer temporary benefits, which involve paying down school lunch debts around the state.
And Rebekah Anderson.
Hi, I'm Rebekah Anderson. I'm the executive director of the Bountiful Food Pantry. So we're a food pantry in Davis County, and we feed primarily people in Davis County, but anybody who comes to us. And this year, we're expecting to feed over 100,000 people.
Wow. So I think that's a good transition. And I know some of you guys work on like other fields besides hunger, but obviously Utahns Against Hunger, our big focus is on hunger or food insecurity. And leading in, everybody's probably familiar with the phrase, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And with reference to that, I'm curious about some of the effects you guys see when we're talking about hunger, specifically when we're talking about hunger and food insecurity going unchecked. Either effects on, obviously, on the people experiencing it, which you would expect to see, but also on organizations that are trying to address it. Like, how does it impact people trying to do the work when there's a compounded need, basically?
Can I jump in on this one? Because my answer might be out in left field, but this is my personal opinion. I actually think as a food pantry that we are preventative, which sounds weird because we're addressing hunger, but I talk to people all the time who are going through financial crisis. And actually just before this, I was talking to a woman who her husband is laid off over the winter. So they were trying to figure out how to pay their mortgage, how to pay their car notes, how to take care of all the things for their kids, because they had been used to a certain system of paying their bills, and all of a sudden that was gone. My idea is that if somebody is in a financial crisis and they can come to my pantry, which it's very easy to get food from a pantry, and use the money they would have used for groceries to pay their mortgage or to, pay whatever they need to for their children, then in 3 or 4 months down the road, they have probably regulated their situation rather than get into a situation where all of these other bills are behind. So although it sounds a little bit weird, I think that food pantries are preventative in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, and I'd love to like turn that around, because one of the things we talk about a lot when we're advocating is to people who are in this precarious situation where they're under strain right now, but a lot of things could go wrong and make it much, much worse. And I know that actually everybody here touches on that in one way or another, and it may not specifically be like, okay, I'm like food insecure this month, but like obviously school meal debt, if you get hit with a bill for collections, like almost any of the resources that 211 is going to be dealing with. And I'm wondering if you guys have like sort of a similar experience trying to, I guess, cut people off before they fall off the cliff, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ben.
All right. Yeah, just kind of going off of what Rebekah was saying, I think giving that little bit of breathing room as early as possible is like really critical for like preventing those future downfalls or spirals from happening. So if you can like get someone in touch with the resource earlier than later, and maybe give them that little bit of breathing room that allows them to prevent other crises in other parts of their life, like with housing or other fields that just need to be paid off, then I think that early intervention can really do a lot to save future effort. So a little bit early can be quite a bit to save a lot later as well.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate both Rebekah and Ben's comments there. It definitely feels like, even though I'm specific to school lunch debt, it ends up impacting everyone's life. If you're not paying for school meals, chances are you might be a family that's suffering from food insecurity elsewhere as well. And access to resources as quickly as possible, get people back on their feet, hopefully lead to long-term stability for them. I did want to say too, Neil, it seemed in the original question too, you were also asking how can food insecurity sort of impact people? And I just wanted to bring up the fact that in the school lunch debt field in particular, there are a lot of students now who are skipping meals. And I imagine that's the same for food insecure families. And the adverse impacts of that in the rest of your life. You know, imagine if you end up getting a bad education because you weren't able to focus in class and those sort of things. So I think food insecurity, although people focus on, you know, like the food pantry, feeding 100,000 families, by the way, Rebekah, incredible. But even just solving that one thing, it's actually touching all aspects of people's lives.
So, building off of that last point, touching all aspect of someone's life, I'm sure all of you guys have probably had an experience along these lines when you start. Okay, say you're working on hunger and you come into contact with somebody who needs help on that front. Really quickly, it becomes apparent that there's all of these different things that tie in to need when it shows up as hunger or food insecurity. And I'm wondering if you guys like can speak a little bit to your experiences with some of like the unexpected connections that people might have, like of direct needs that people experience that aren't necessarily obvious. Obviously, hunger is very visible, but it's connected with all sorts of stuff that people might not expect.
I don't have specific examples of specific needs that have come up. I do more of like the partnership side and like bringing the partners together. And we're trying to figure out a way like for partners to talk to each other so that they are addressing multiple needs. So like a family also, we don't want them to have to tell their story multiple times, right? And especially like if they're talking about food, they might go into all the other things that they need help with. And it's hard to like relay that multiple times to people. And so we're like, how can we get these providers, like food providers, housing providers, other types of providers together to like address those needs? And I think something we've also heard from schools is like employment is a big thing too. Like they say they need food, but then they're like, but I also need a job. But then that leads to like, how do I access a job? How do I apply for a job? How do I prepare for a job? Um, and so I think it does all relate and it's all complicated. It's a lot, and I think there's a lot of things we can do to like break it down as well.
Neil, I don't know if this answers your question, but kind of similar to what Whitney was saying. We at my organization, we're very food focused, so that's really all we do. However, every new person that comes in sits down with a volunteer because we check to make sure that they're in need. And you know, sometimes it's as simple as checking and verbally they're in need, and that's enough. Sometimes we check pay stubs, but those volunteers, although we focus on food, are really given the opportunity to talk to people and find out if there are other needs. And we can't necessarily directly help with those needs, but we can make connections. So for example, last week we found somebody who they were at our pantry for the first time because their husband had lost his job. He had been hurt and couldn't do his job anymore. They'd been out of work for a couple months. And so she was coming to the pantry for the first time. Well, as we were talking to her, we found out that during this process, her home had gone into foreclosure. I don't have any money to help put somebody's home back right as far as with the mortgage company, but I do know somebody. So we were able to get her information and connect her with somebody who's able to help her. Got some paper, went back and forth. This person and I have practically become best friends over the last week. And it looks like within the next couple of days, her mortgage is going to be caught up. So although that's not something that we do, we really try and find those connections and identify ways that other people can help our clients once we realize they have additional issues that they need help with.
I think, oh, no, actually, I'm going to let Ben.
I was just going to say, I think that's a really good opportunity where 211 can step in too and help out with these organizations, because we don't need like every food volunteer to necessarily be an expert on like housing resources in Utah, but they can then just easily direct that person to call 211 or another information referral database. And then we can be experts in that field and get them connected to a completely different issue area that we might know, oh, there's someone in your county that can help with that. So I think that's a really good opportunity as well, where we can step in and make sure that we're all like experts in our own area.
Well, and sometimes, Ben, we'll sit down with our people next to each other on a computer and we'll go to 211.org, right? And we'll look it up with them. So instead of just being like, go home, look up 211, we like look at it with them because it's such a great resource. And a lot of the times, if it's something that we don't know about, we can find the resource on 211. So that's a huge help.
And I love that you said that as well, Rebekah, because we're definitely trying to move more toward a warm transfer environment where instead of just saying, oh, here's this number, good luck, like you're out of our hands now, we really like take the time to guide them through that process and make sure that that gets completed. So I love that you guys do that with your clients.
So I'm really loving this. And I think you guys have sort of anticipated where I wanted to go with the next question. You guys have talked a lot about making connections and the importance of making connections with not just with other organizations, but connecting volunteers with information resources as they're trying to help people. One of the things that, you know, as a state, we're pretty lucky with is just a general wellspring of enthusiasm for volunteerism and getting just the general sense of getting involved. But that's a big challenge in itself. You have to channel that enthusiasm and connect it to problems as you see them. Even something as straightforward as serving somebody meals, well, there's a process to serving meals. You have to find the people who need the meals, et cetera. And I'm wondering if you guys can talk about like some of the challenges in making that leap. Somebody who's just got a lot of enthusiasm, has become passionate about an issue, and then the action that they can take towards it, directing them for the resources or just a place where they can be active.
I think it depends on if they want like a one and done type of opportunity. Because we do a lot of like meal kit packing with our organization, and I think we did like 14,000 last year or something for schools. And it's a lot of it's a good opportunity for like organizations, corporations, like to come together and like pack these meal kits, and people can do it and they feel good. They go home, they're like, I packed this many meal kits today. But I also think we have to consider like those who are really interested in like long-term solutions for addressing food and hunger, and how can we create spaces where they can get involved in those long-term and really getting at the root cause of like why we have those hunger issues. Um, so I think it kind of depends on the person too, and who you're talking to about volunteering. But there are a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I totally agree with Whitney here. In fact, it's been one of the primary struggles with the communication of my organization, because a lot of people think we're focused on, you know, paying down school lunch debts, which feels really good. There's nothing more satisfying than going to a school, delivering a check. There's no more lunch debt here. But the truth is there's a bigger, more permanent problem that requires a lot more effort to solve. And even if you donate once, or you know, you go to the food bank or you pack meal kits, that's great. And I think I do that myself, and I love the feeling that comes from it. And then there's another type of person who, if you want to see this lasting change, or if this issue is extremely important to you, like it is to me, and I can definitely say just from listening to you guys that it's as important to you in each of your respective fields, that, you know, there are more long-term things you can do. And I just want to shout out one example. At utldr.org, which is my foundation's website, you can go to your advocacy page, and something that has a similar impact, in my opinion, do maybe one meal kit or something like that, you can also take a few minutes to email your representative and say, hey, I care about this particular issue. I care about food insecurity. Let's take care of that. And I think a lot of people don't realize that there are resources out there, which is something you had mentioned, Neil, where if you go to that particular page on my site, you just type in your address and we already have an email ready to go that we'll send to your representative. So I just wanted to mention that.
So there's an interesting point you raised, Whitney. Like there's a distinction between somebody who's volunteering in a one-off, like you said, and establishing a relationship with someone who, like as a volunteer, as an ongoing, like basically a part, sort of a member of your organization, just in a volunteer capacity. And it's that distinction speaks to a bunch of complications in volunteers as an asset to organizations. Like obviously it's a big benefit to have people signing up, but there are a lot of pros and cons, and there are a lot of difficulties in managing volunteers that people may not realize when they get all excited to sign up and like get involved or something. I'm wondering if you guys can speak to like some of the work that's involved in directing volunteer labor, because I know it is work. You guys definitely spend time like thinking about how to do it and like and making sure people are using their time like effectively when they sign up to do something.
Can I speak to that a little bit? Again, this is Rebekah's soapbox. So at my organization, a big focus for us is not only taking care of the people we feed, but it's taking care of our volunteers. So we actually recently changed our mission to include that our mission is not only to feed the hungry, but to give people an opportunity to serve. So kind of like what Whitney was talking about earlier, like it really depends on the person who's volunteering. We try and find a way that matches them. So like I have people who want to volunteer and they want to help, but they do not want to talk to people in the public. They are shy, they are introverts, and we put them in the warehouse like pre-packaging hygiene kits or something, which is great. I have other people that they want to be out there. They want to be talking to the people that we're helping, and they want to be working with the public. So we really try and find something that works for them. I think if I had somebody who came in and they were seeing what we were doing and they were volunteering and they really wanted to make long-term change for hunger, I would probably say, you know what, you should look into Utahns Against Hunger, or I would try to refer them to another organization. But I think a big part of my staff's job is making sure that our volunteers have a good experience and that they understand why what they're doing is valuable and how much of a difference it makes, and making sure that that we're utilizing their gifts in a way that makes sense. And that's not always possible. Sometimes in the nonprofit world, we are just trying to survive because we're trying to do way more with way less money, less people, and we don't have the opportunity to do that. But I think if we can focus on things like that, then it really helps with volunteer retention, people coming back, people feeling like they're doing a good thing.
I agree with what you said, Rebecca. We kind of incorporate some of those into our volunteer opportunities as well. One thing I thought that was cool that we did, or one school did, it's not something we came up with, but the school came up with the kids serving within their school and doing volunteer projects within their school. So they were directly impacting their family, their community. And I thought that was a kind of a cool idea. And I think people, when they think of food and hunger, they're like, think big, like it's like a global problem, but there's a lot that like you can do within your own communities. And I think it's sometimes good to remind people of that and that they can impact like just their little neighborhood in many ways.
So I think you guys, I was speaking to the idea of just like one-off volunteers. Like there seems to be a sort of curve of people getting like interested in idea, maybe people reaching out to like talk about volunteering or get involved with an organization. And then like another like step along the curve is somebody who continues to become involved and or maybe gets like more deeply involved. What do you guys think are some of the barriers that are keeping people from connecting with organizations if they've got like a general impetus? I think most people, if you just ask them like, hey, are you concerned about hunger or food insecurity, are probably going to go, yeah. What do you think are the barriers keeping people from taking the next step, or somebody who maybe shows up one time from taking another step into becoming a regular volunteer?
I mean, this is a pretty simple answer, but a lot of the times that we see in our database, just the hours of a lot of food pantries and food resources in general are very sporadic. And I think it should be kind of self-fulfilling where there's maybe not a lot of volunteers initially, which limits the hours available, which then kind of limits other volunteers from getting involved because maybe they have work during that time. So I think that's why that one-off volunteer opportunity is a lot more popular, just because it's like, okay, I know this will work with my schedule this one time, but maybe it's more difficult to find something within lining up the hours that works long term.
I definitely want to drill into this because it's something that comes up, like it's a very deceptively simple answer. It's something that I know in my experience working on this comes up so frequently. Oh, why don't these hours match up? Or I can't make that time, or that doesn't connect. And there's usually a very good reason for like why a pantry can't set up those hours because they're limited in resources, etc. But I think it speaks to a general theme in a lot of these in how a lot of these volunteer activities have trouble like matching up with the schedules of people on a day to day. It's sort of cast as an afterthought rather than like the response to hunger, like the standard response that it is.
I think that when we look at ways that people can volunteer for our organizations, it's really easy to only look at it from the perspective of what do we need without trying to partner the needs of the volunteer or the organization who's trying to volunteer. So like Ben said, it's a lot easier to do the one and done where, you know, you have a youth group and you've got to schedule something and you know you've got to entertain them that night. So it's easy to have a place to take them and then you move on with your life. So I think it's a lot easier when organizations, I think it's easier to do a long-term thing when organizations are trying to focus on a way to make it possible for you to volunteer in a way that works for you. So some organizations, they have ways for you to volunteer from home. I know one of the organizations that I volunteer, they have really strived to go remote so that people like me can volunteer and help their clients from anywhere, which makes it a lot easier. So I think kind of looking at it from the perspective of not only do the volunteers need to serve us in our mission, but we need to serve the volunteers as well, I think kind of helps with that. I also think one of the biggest things that I've seen is kind of a dropping off point. We sometimes have volunteers, and this doesn't happen very, very often, thank goodness, but we sometimes have volunteers who they're going to start volunteering and they have a shift and they're going to be here every Saturday for the rest of their lives. And then they come in once and they have a bad experience for whatever reason it might be. Well, I won't give you examples, but you know, sometimes there are bad experiences and they never come back. And so I think making sure people have a good experience is important. I have one of my crews that comes on a specific day every week. They have been doing this for so long that they are really good friends and they'll go to Wendover together and they'll go on vacations together and they go on lunch together, which is so great. So the retention there is huge. But by the same token, every once in a while, we try and put a new person in that group and it doesn't mix well because everybody else is such good friends that if they forget to purposely make that person feel welcome, then that person can fall by the wayside. So I think there's a lot of things that happen, but definitely if people don't have a good first experience, then they're probably not going to have a second experience.
I'm hearing like a couple of things as potential positives, things like a regular schedule, like a sense of community as a volunteer, things that all super supportive of people being able to participate. Before I go on, I do want to like invite everybody to just sort of volunteer things that they think like, okay, if we only had like this as an option, people would be getting much more involved, and it can be like a pie in the sky kind of thing. It could be crazy silly. I just want to invite things. What do you guys think would encourage people to get more involved in programs alleviating hunger or programs like addressing poverty, just any of these programs in the community?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Rebekah said touches on this point, which is you need to care about people volunteering for your organization. I think there could be, you know, we don't have a lot of volunteers, but all of the people that I've worked with at the foundation, I like to give them a sense of recognition on the impact that the work that they did, even if it's small, like I talked about sending an email. I feel like a lot of the value that I get from volunteering is knowing that I've made an impact. So when anyone decides to help us out, that's my primary focus. But I think a lot of the other people on this call will have a lot more expertise in the retaining volunteers area.
I kind of want to go back to something Rebekah said about like meeting people where they're at. Um, we focus mostly on South Salt Lake and Mill Creek for a lot of our work. And there's a lot of languages spoken in that area. And I think people hesitate to volunteer because they go and they're like, well, I can't talk to anyone. I can't like understand what's going on. And so I think having people who interact with volunteers who speak other languages, who can like introduce them to the project, be there for them, like be that buddy that Rebekah was talking about too, that sense of community. I think that would bring a lot more people out. And I think they'll invite their neighbors, be like, oh, do you want to go do this with me? Like she was talking about. So I think language is a big thing, especially in the people that we serve.
So I think that's inching towards something I'd also like to talk about. Obviously, having like a great base of volunteers and people who are ready to just pitch in is invaluable. But there are also things that organizations can't rely on volunteers to do. And I'm wondering if you guys can speak to things, because a lot of people will assume that like, okay, people are willing to pitch in, that's gonna solve it. But there also do need to be these backbone parts of the organization. I would love it if you guys could speak to some of the things that kind of are beyond the reach, things that volunteers need in order to volunteer with organizations. So what's the bedrock that needs to be in place? I mean, we could just start with your respective efforts, obviously.
I'm just going to keep talking. I feel like I'm taking over this call and I'm so sorry. But I have lots of thoughts. Okay, so the question was why do we need staff, right? So my thought on that is that we need a support system for our volunteers where they know they constantly have somebody to rely on. So for example, I have volunteers that work with clients. We only let them come twice a month because we only have so many groceries to go around. So if somebody wants to come get groceries the third time on a month, I don't expect my volunteer to like argue with that person and be like, no, you can't. You've already been here too many times. We're feeding too many people. I'm sorry, you got to come back in 2 days when that month is over. That's what my staff is for. Any hard conversation my staff should have, any uncomfortable conversation my staff should have. If anybody mistreats my volunteers, I should have a staff member who can go up there and be like, this is not acceptable. We do not treat our volunteers poorly. So I need you to kind of straighten yourself out. We want to help you, but we need to have a good interaction. I also think that there are so many things going on at organizations, and volunteers can be so in and out, and they change, and the people evolve. You need to have somebody there who always understands what's going on and is constantly willing to train and teach and support people. So even if you've had people who've been there for a long time, stuff changes all the time. And we get longtime volunteers, they'll come up and be like, okay, I don't understand. You're telling me I need to give someone this much beef, but I only have this much beef. And, we're the people who are answering those questions and giving them support so they can feel good about what they're doing. So I think it's almost like if you think about any regular job, if you have employees with no manager, nobody to tell them what they're there for and what the goals are and what they need to accomplish, then the employees are going to falter, and it's not their fault. It's because they don't have somebody directing the ship. So I think staff members are really, really important to give that support to volunteers so they have a good experience, so they feel good about their experience, and so they're doing something in a way that works for everybody.
So I think building out on that a little bit, I know some of you guys work at like explicitly making connections between organizations and between like those permanent staff members who, again, like those of us who are working in this space recognize that like, okay, like you could probably make more money if you were in another line of work. You could probably like get more benefits, etc. Like there's a certain degree of buy-in you have as a person who's working like for one of these organizations. What kind of support do you need if you're trying to establish healthy partnerships in this space, if you're trying to make connections with other organizations, what information or what resources are critical to just keeping your workplaces healthy, like in addition to like the boots on the ground staff, et cetera.
What we see a lot is people are like super enthusiastic and want to do something like we've talked about. And then we ended up duplicating efforts a lot of the time. And so I think what we would love to see is like stronger communication among those who are the staff who are kind of like those backbone agencies who are doing the volunteer programs. And I think it'd be helpful like if we kept each other updated a lot more on like what we're working on. The volunteers, like I'd love to like visit websites and like see like what they're doing, see updates, and just kind of maybe de-silo, I would say. I know that's like a buzzword a little bit, but like I think it'd be very helpful if we just work together a little bit more instead of focusing on just like what our organization is doing at the time.
I totally agree with that. And I think it's really important to like use data to like drive our efforts and where we put our resources. Like we probably don't need another food pantry in downtown Salt Lake, but maybe there's a rural area that does not have any food resources at all and could really use that energy and that money and that like work power there. So I think using the data that we have right now of what resources are needed, what are some of those gaps across the state, that's really critical for any efforts moving forward.
I'm going to pick on you a little bit because this is a very 2-on-1 specific question, but like I know that there's like a lot of the enthusiasm that Whitney's talking about when you get like small organizations like little pantries that are run out of a church, et cetera. And I mean, like it's different, it's really difficult to like incorporate those people into like the work that you do and make sure that people have a ready connection to that resource as and when it becomes available. And I'm wondering like what is needed to like make that an easier connection to make, basically.
Yeah, I think just multiple forms of communication. Like we do at least an annual update on every single one of our providers in the database. So every year we'll reach out to those small pantries in those tiny towns and see like, hey, what's changed? Are you still offering the same resources, same phone number, that sort of thing? And it can be really difficult to get in touch with those people. So I think establishing like stronger networks of communication where I could call them, yes, but also send them an email, go in person if needed, setting up like multiple forms of communication where if one doesn't work, I can tap into another one is really, really important for us to be able to do those updates and make sure that that data is like correct every year. If that answers your question.
No, absolutely. So guys, I gotta say, like I've done a bunch of these, and it continues to amaze me how quickly like time flies as we actually go through these. I want to let you guys get a chance back to get back to your day and everything. But before I do, I want to invite you to plug anything you want to plug, recommend any resources you want to recommend to people who may be watching. Just sort of same order again, Whitney, Ben, DJ, and Rebekah. And I'll turn it over to you guys.
Oh, I was hoping I'd go last. I have to think about your question. You Um, yeah, just thank you for being here today. I loved hearing the thoughts from everybody because I think food is so important, and our organization has kind of taken like a step back from like focusing on food specifically, just because we know there's so much amazing work going on within food. Um, but I'll just put a plug into 2-in-1 because I used to be in that department as well. That like I think it's a great resource. I also we work with the Bountiful Food Pantry as well, and I think that's an amazing resource as well. So I think there's a lot of amazing resources out there, and then we would love to hear more from them and what they're doing, and get them updated and make connections with them as well.
I'm so sorry, my internet is like wavering, so you're cutting in and out. Give me just 1 minute and I'll readjust my router. If Rebekah,
No problem.
Jay wanted to go.
Yeah, why don't we just skip over to DJ?
Yeah. That's totally fine. I have to say, I've gotten immense value from this panel, which is how you know it's a good panel. Just listening to you guys talk, I feel like if I don't point you in the direction of those resources, you absolutely should. Every single person on this call, I think, like one of the themes that I felt that I heard from this panel is communication, awareness, direction, purpose, like a lot of those things tied together. And I feel like a sense of, all of us are collectively addressing food insecurity. And if someone is watching this call and wants to do something about it, I can assure you that there are resources out there if you just look. There are many different ways to volunteer. We've highlighted several. Even if it's sending an email, to give my plug, as Neil said, you can go to utldr.org. All of our funds go to school lunch debt relief, or you can fill out an advocacy form. But there are so many ways to help. You can go to a food pantry, you can pack meal kits. There are just numerous ways. So I hope to see you at one of these events if you are watching this.
Let's go over to Rebekah and then Ben.
Okay, I have two things. So number one, the biggest issue that I encounter is people are not aware of how vast the hunger issues are in our state, particularly in Davis County. People are not aware that there is a need. I think if there's anybody who is not aware of the need or they're skeptical, I would recommend they call their local elementary school and talk to one of the people in the office and ask about the need, because those people understand the need possibly better than any of us. And they can also tell you everybody who is helping them, whether it's UTL or me or United Way 211, like we are all working together. So if you have any doubt about there being a need, call your local elementary school and they'll give you some information. The second thing I would say is, for people who want to help, and we've talked a lot about this on the call, like DJ said, but if somebody wants to help, I would encourage them to find out what they think they are good at. Every single person has gifts and we all have unique gifts, and every single one of us has a way that we can help others. I would find out what you're good at and find a way that you can use that. So for example, if you're good at leadership, you might be good running events for the United Way. If you're good at accounting, there are probably small pantries or small nonprofits who really need your help and guidance so that they can remain financially viable. If you are good at rallying the troops and getting people to sign up, you might be good at getting everybody in your neighborhood to, send one of these letters through utl.org. So regardless of what people have to bring to the table, there is a way that they can use their talents to help. It's just a matter of putting those together. So I think be confident in yourself, find out what you're good at, and find a way to use it, because there's a way that everybody can help.
That should be good now. Sorry about that, everyone. But yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, thank you so much for everyone for jumping on this forum. I learned a lot as well. And it was great to hear more about kind of on the ground experiences with the food pantry, like Rebekah. Working in 211, we do cover all different issue areas, but I always have a special passion in my heart for food insecurity. It's where I'm most interested in. So I love to hear all about these different perspectives. I would just say, if you're someone that's facing food insecurity, or if you know someone that might be a cousin, a friend, a family member, definitely just give 211 a call and we can connect you with someone that really cares about your situation and can look for resources that are tailored to your county, your eligibility, who you are, and what you need. So definitely give 211 like a call. Likewise, if you're a provider, definitely contact us as well, and we can get you in the database if you're not already in the database, and we can get you set up to get more and more referrals if you feel like your resources are not being utilized to the fullest extent that they could be. So yeah, again, thank you so much, everyone, for getting on this call, and yeah, give 211 a call.
Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. And thanks to those of you who are watching. This has been Utahns Against Hunger's issue forum on direct action. Look for more next year. And I hope you guys have a nice evening.